What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mechs on Deck. Today we have a very special guest, the owner and operator of Norbauer and Company, Mr. Ryan Norbauer. How are you doing?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. What about you, Chewy? How are you?
It's been a day. I'll be honest, it's been a day. No, but I'm good, man. I'm good. Glad to have Mr. Norbauer here. Someone we actually met at the NorCal meetup a little over a year ago. We were talking. It feels unfortunately much longer ago than that, but had a lovely conversation with you there. So I'm glad to have you on the show. We had talked about having you on the show, and someone reached out.
Meetups.
We do too, man.
Yeah, we went into 2020 with big plans to go to a couple meetups, and we had actually already purchased plane tickets to go to NorCal, and then that got canceled or got rescheduled and then canceled. I was just like, man, maybe someday.
Yeah, I was looking forward to KeyCon in Colorado. It was going to be cool.
We were very excited to meet because it's when we went to NorCal, we had been around for about 8-9 months yet by that point, but we didn't really start picking up until like August, September. So it'd only been a couple months where we were kind of on people's radar, and then it's only gotten a lot more intense since then. And so we've met all these new people, and that's the best part about getting to do these interviews, right? We get to meet all these people, and it's like, yeah, let's meet all these people that we've had at least FaceTime with over the internet, actually in person, and then yeah.
Well, you guys get to be a sort of virtual meetup, I suppose.
Yes, it does help the extrovert in me going like, hey, I get to talk to people new once a week every week.
I don't have an extrovert in me, so.
But before we get started, quick shout out to our awesome sponsors, Dixie Mech, SwitchMod.net, Canon Keys, and Project Keyboards, as well as our awesome partners, Smith.
Those are all awesome guys. Those are all awesome people. I'm just
they're great people. Zap Cables, Type Beast, and Smith and Rune. We'll hear more from them later. We typically with a fast four. I'm very interested to hear your top four of one of these specifically, which I will ask, just your top 4 favorite switches.
So I'm going to answer actually non-facetiously, but I understand why you might think that is the case. So Topra 30 gram, Topra 45, Topra 55, Cherry MX Red Silent.
That might be a first on the Cherry MX Red Silent.
I think it is.
I like lubed Cherry MX Red Silent, the thing.
You just like what you like, and that's the best part. There's nothing wrong with you liking Cherry MX Red Silence.
Even better in a Zeal housing.
Ooh. Interesting. I feel like now I have to go try that. Like I need to get some Cherry MX Red Silence and mess around with them, because that is an interesting choice that we haven't heard before. But next,
I can't explain it. I felt it at a meetup. It was amazing. The thing. My intuition. I spent a long time when I was first getting into keyboards, trying to figure out what switches I would like, and I find that my intuitions are always totally wrong. Like hearing it described, in no way gives me a good sense of whether I'll actually like it. You just have to try it, because I'm sure everyone experience. I thought I would like blues. That was when I was like first reading about mechanical keyboards. I was so excited, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be amazing." Absolutely despised it within 5 seconds.
We it's funny, we talk about this a lot. I feel like a lot of people's you hear the clacks, right? You hear the clicky switches, and it's like the gateway drug, right? You're like, oh, that's cool, I want something that sounds like a typewriter, but it's not a typewriter. And then after a little bit, you're like, you know what, maybe this isn't the right maybe this isn't the best thing in the world. Like maybe I'll start actually exploring
this concept. That would be an improvement. Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we'll go with your top 4 favorite key sets, and we'll eliminate your sets from that.
Okay, so GMK Laser, I'm quite fond of that one. And so just generally speaking, most of the stuff Mito does, I think, is fantastic. Both like the aesthetic curation of it, and also just how incredibly rigorous he is about organizing the projects, and sort of all the collateral material. Just like super professional and cool, and a cool guy. So I like all of his stuff. Although, let's see, eliminating my sets, that's tough, actually. I mean, I don't have many, and I wouldn't put Galaxy Class on there because I think it's ugly. But I do like, I did it because I thought it was conceptually a cool project. But a couple of other sets I have and I'm working on I really like, but I didn't realize I could eliminate those. I think uh, what I use on my daily driver keyboard is Topra stock black on black keycaps. So there are legends, but they're sort of barely perceptible, dye sublimated on the stock Topra PBT. That's probably actually my favorite because it's what I choose to type on every
Mhm.
day. And yeah, I'm not sure I actually have anything beyond that in terms of favorite key sets. There's like, because there are a lot of them I see designs for and I admire abstractly, but I usually don't actually end up owning them and using them just because at the moment it's sort of, obviously I'm a Topra guy and the situation for those of us who like Topra keycaps is a little bit precarious.
Mhm.
There are alternatives for MX compatibility, but they're not necessarily great and they sort of uh, make the acoustics and the tactile experience a little bit suboptimal. And I'll mess around with it for visual aesthetic reasons occasionally, but I oftentimes just find myself coming back to sort of stock Topper keycap, unfortunately.
So no Topr High Pro though. That's a common one on many people's lists.
I do quite like actually Topper High Pro, but there's some issue about. So I have a set of them, and I don't use them on my daily driver keyboard because there's some issue of compatibility that I'm not remembering. Um,
I think
yeah, I don't know.
the JP set is like weird, has some weird legends with like the bottom row and modifiers.
Yeah, certainly that one. But I have an ANSI like 100% High Pro set, and I thought there was some reason why I couldn't fit it on my Real Force TKL, but I may be misremembering. And in fact, I should give it a try.
Could be like
I
a short right shift or something, or just like if it's not
something
true
like
ANSI
that.
with the right shift.
I seem to remember there being a quirk of like a because there's the bottom left control on the older Real Forces has that like rotated housing for the LED. Might be
Mhm.
something to do with that.
Oh.
I can't remember. You know what I would love is I love the increased wall thickness of the Topra High Pro uh, molds, but I don't really love the extremely sculpted profile, especially as you get up towards the top where they're super tall. I would love
Mhm.
like a DSA equivalent where they're flat, but they have the high pro form factor of that really
Mhm.
interesting shape and the thicker wall, which sounds nicer, like an SA or whatever. I would love to
Very
see that
nice.
someday.
So we'll exclude lots of cases, unfortunately, on this one. But your top 4 favorite keyboards.
So I have a extraordinary bias towards the Real Force. I've tried many alternative keyboards. I always come back to it. The ANSI form factor is definitely something that I'll never be able to sort of unwire my brain to favor, I think. And the Real Force, especially the 87U, is just a keyboard that I particularly love and always will. And so, again, I'm going to give you a one answer to a four answer question. Nothing really comes close to those others. I've made, I have like sort of rules about keyboards that I'm willing to make housings for, and I have to have like a good reason for doing it. And one of them is it would be a keyboard that I would use, and that's certainly why I made my Real Force housing. But the Heavy Grail project that I'm working on now is a keyboard I would never use. I could never get used to the HHKB multi-layer form factor. I think it's beautiful to look at as an object, but I just I don't want to rewire my brain. I'm lazy, and so I did that project because it had interesting technical challenges, right? But I would never put it on my list of like favorite keyboards, list of like my favorite projects for sure. But I just use one keyboard at the moment.
Simple man.
Hey, you know what you like, so you stick to it, right? I get that.
Well, this next one, hopefully you'll have 4 things, and that's your top 4 favorite foods.
Yes. So let's see. Bacon, Liège waffles, white chocolate, um, nougat, French nougat.
That sounds like a meal. It sounds like an interesting an
A four
interesting
course meal.
yeah.
Sort of a dessert heavy meal, but
Yeah.
nevertheless.
I mean, hey, self care, right?
Care,
So,
right.
Treat
guys,
yourself. It's the holidays.
exactly. If you guys don't know who Mr. Ryan Norbauer, I can't talk, man. The kids got to me today. I'm sorry. Mr. Ryan Norbauer. He is the designer of such boards as the Heavy 6, the Norba Force Mark 1 and Mark 2, the Heaven 9, which I didn't even know existed until like today. So that one's on me.
They
And
don't
the
sort of exist yet. I haven't actually shipped them yet. Although
Okay, well
they
then
all
that
exist
at
now.
least makes me not feel as bad.
They
So
don't
and
give me
then the Heavy Grail, which is running right now. If you hit exclamation point heavy, you can go check that out. He's also designer of such sets as After School 1992, as well as DSA Galaxy Class, a Star Trek themed set. As well as a man of many trades. This is just pulled off of the website. Worked at NASA, the CDC, and the British Parliament, as well as starting up many startup companies. Welcome to the show, Ryan Norbauer.
Glad to be here.
So, we typically, with the fast four, when we move on, most people like to know, how did you get into the hobby?
Well, depends on what you mean by the hobby. Maybe we could separate that question into how did I get into keyboards and how did I become involved in the keyboard community? Two sort of separate issues. My interest in and love of keyboards goes back to like probably the third or fourth grade for me. When I was when I was young, I was very enthusiastic about computing and its sort of promise for the future, and was quite keen to learn how to program. And I had the good fortune to be in a classroom that gave me access to a lot of computers that even by that time were actually a bit old. So like the Apple IIe, IBM PS2, um, the original Mac. All of these computers had amazing keyboards because they were still from an era when keyboards were relatively rare. They were expensive, mostly made in the United States, and they were worth investing a great deal of effort and expense in making well. And so, I have this like deep, nostalgic, visceral memory of what I think of as mechanical, clacky keyboards. The PS2 with its buckling spring, the I believe Alps keyboard on the Apple IIe. I don't remember what the Mac had, but it was also had a similar sort of feel about it. And so, I would this affection for what we think of as mechanical keyboards was seeded for me in a very early age and is deeply connected to my enthusiasm for computing and this idea that enchanted me a lot as a child of the future and like let's say future optimism and how that was connected to technology. And so that stayed with me as I got older. I used sort of doggedly stuck with a buckling spring keyboard for a really long period of time beyond well past when they were commercially reasonably available, all the way through college, and was always sort of very fussy about and interested in keyboards, particularly vintage keyboards. But it wasn't until probably around 2009 or so that I discovered that there was an online community of people who were interested in this, and that there were still companies manufacturing new components and keyboards that felt like the keyboards that I remembered instead of the sort of cheap $5 things that come on Dells, right? And this wasn't like such an exciting revelation for me when I discovered Geekhack and how incredibly nerdy people got about this stuff. And I became extremely obsessed with it for like 2 weeks or so. Like just when I first discovered it, like I literally had trouble sleeping because I was so excited about like thinking about the possibilities of all the different switches I could try and how I could mod them and everything. And I don't know, for some reason I have a very like clear memory of that specific period and how intensely excited I was about it. And so I just started posting and having conversations with people on Geekhack. I remember there was like this. I don't know if it's true anymore. Perhaps it still is, but it used to be in order to like trade on the forums or trade in the like marketplace or whatever that is on Geekhack, you had to have had a certain amount of like posts and interactions to qualify. And I remember like meeting that criterion within a day or something, just because I was like actively posting it, like dredging up through these old forums and asking technical questions and trying to help other people out, and just like enjoying those conversations enormously. And so that's when I got started, and that was actually a really long time ago. I don't have a good sense of exactly how old Geekhack is, but this would definitely be considered, the early days for most people who are involved in the keyboard community now. And I remember interacting with a lot of people who are, um, you know, pretty active and sort of prominent vendors now, which was pretty cool. And that's when I got sort of involved in the sense of like as a enthusiast and consumer. It wasn't until a few years later when this keyboard came out called the Nova Touch that I was super interested in, um, that I started my path towards keyboard making. Obviously, I liked it because I've had discovered by this point that my favorite switch was the Topra switch, the sort of Topra platform. But I didn't, I was sad because I started out with experimenting with cherry boards. I was sad to discover that meant that my keycap options were very limited. And I think by this time, designed the first iteration of the Galaxy class key set, and I wanted to be able to use it while still having a Topra switch experience. So I was excited about the Nova Touch, but nobody was making a CNC machine metal housing for it. And I had a CNC machine metal housing, which I got from this obscure Korean group buy for my Real Force. And so that was my favorite keyboard. In fact, the keyboard that I still use to this day as my daily driver is the same guts as that. It's now in one of my housings. But nevertheless, I had become accustomed to and really like this idea of like a super heavy, big black anodized block of metal holding my keyboard. Um, and 'cause,
It's
it
the
just has
dream,
that,
right?
well, yeah, again, it conceptually connected to me with this idea of like computers and keyboards being the embodiment of like futuristic science fiction ideas and aesthetics that I grew up with, right? And it just kind of like it looked like something that would have come out of one of those universes, and so it was deeply satisfying to me. Um, and anyway, so no such housing existed for the Nova Touch, and so I tried. You can go back and see my posts on Geekhack, like basically begging someone to make one. And after months of efforts, was not able to succeed in that begging project. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna learn how to do machining and CAD modeling and figure out how to do this myself. And so I did, and that's what set me down the path of making keyboard stuff. Um, my first group buy was kind of popular for that, and sort of things went from there.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and it goes to show that if you want something but it doesn't exist, don't wait around for people to do it. Sometimes you just got to do it yourself.
Well, I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been better if somebody else had done it. Probably would have designed by might have been more interesting because my design for that now I kind of view as not particularly something to be proud of because I was designing it entirely around manufacturability. Right? I was thinking as a machinist, what's the simplest way to make this thing so I could get it done as cheaply as possible, so that you know if I can only get 5 other people to join the group buy with me, we can actually afford it. Right? Nowadays, I would approach it very differently, thinking about it as a design exercise, and I'd uh, be thinking more about the aesthetics of it.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of shifts us into another question is um, what kind of challenges, like what does the design process look like when you approach a new project like the Heavy Grail or the Heavy Nine? Um, and what are the challenges in designing not only for different layouts, but for different, already made boards?
Sure. Well, so I guess there are two questions there. There's the aesthetic question, and then there's the technical question. Aesthetically, first, I'll say that I kind of try to think about when you're designing around someone else's product or someone else's design, and it's something that other people like. I try to try to. This sounds very pompous, but I'm trying to like get to the essence of what that keyboard is, right? or what might make it special or interesting to design around, right? And so, like for example, when thinking about the FC660C, I'm thinking like, what is it about that keyboard that appeals to people versus another layout, right? And so I got interested in this idea of like compactness, right? And uh, that, and therefore the idea of something that kind of like is concentrated and heavy, and that led me to the idea of sort of like a slightly more industrial aesthetic. So like it has those big chamfers on it, right? And it has this sort of like, it looks like a big weight. That was kind of my idea, and for me that was just like proceeding from the idea that the FC660C is just this like this highly, a normal keyboard sort of squished into a smaller space, right? And the Heavy Nine is just sort of like is just an extension of the design language of the Heavy Six, just because it's like they're sort of in the same line from Leopold, so it just made sense to keep those together conceptually. And so and then the Heavy Grail, I think, which is on my housing for the HHKB. Again, I'm trying to think about like what is it that draws people to that keyboard? What is the essence of the HHKB? And obviously, to some extent, it's the layout. It's become a very popular layout even outside of the HHKB itself, obviously. And so um, that's part of it. I was obviously going to inevitably replicate the layout, but there are other things about it. If you actually type on the board and feel it, the typing experience of that keyboard next to any other Topper board, there is a certain kind of bounciness to it that is unique to that keyboard. And so it felt very important to me to try to replicate that dampened typing experience that is to me what makes it different than every other Topper keyboard. And so that's what drove my design decisions around that particular board.
Yeah. So in designing different boards, obviously you've done. Not only have you made multiple boards, you've also on the Norbaforce, you've made two different ones. So in approaching your first one and then kind of going, how do you look at that board and kind of go, this is wrong with this, and kind of go, where do you start in trying to make those improvements?
Sure. So, I mean, this relates to the second part of your question that I just realized I forgot to answer from before, which is, what are the special challenges, I suppose, of reverse engineering around somebody else's project, or somebody else's product. And in the case of the Norbaforce Mark II, the modifications were primarily around extending compatibility to the new keyboard, the new line of R2 keyboards that Topper had come out with. And so it has always been a curse / challenge of my projects that whenever I make something, an aftermarket housing for a keyboard, it seems to become instantly unavailable commercially. So that was true of the Novatouch. It was true the FC660C was almost unobtainable when I was running my my group buy for the housing for that. And that when I did the first round of the Real Force, the 87Us were starting to become scarce because I think they were slowly tapering that line with the anticipation of starting the R2. And the R2 is very similar to the 87U family, but there are subtle enough changes that you can't put it into one of my original housings. So, I have this problem of people always, saying, "Hey, I really want to get one of your cases. I would love to see this project run again, but I just actually can't find the keyboard that goes with it." And so the only solution to that was to try to engineer like an in-between solution that would fit both the 87U and the R2, so that I could actually at some point be selling a housing that you could buy a keyboard for at the same time. And I think that's the Mark II is the only time that's ever been true of anything I've ever made, which is you could buy it at the same time as you could buy the keyboard that goes in it. And I mean, that's just the problem, right? Is that the people who are designing the product are not aware of or don't care that the people are making aftermarket housings for it, and so their they make engineering decisions that suit whatever is makes it most manufacturable for them. And the Mark II or the R2s have these little tabs on the front of the plate, just as the 87U does. But the tabs are just like one of the tabs is moved over by a millimeter, right? So it's almost like they were just intentionally fucking with me at Topra. And the same thing, like the connector has five cables instead of four, the internal connector. Whereas before, the fifth was this little like separate cable that had two eyelets on the end. Whereas the new one is just like a Molex style connector on both ends. Those are the only changes, but they require a totally new design to support it. So I wouldn't say that the Mark II is like a radical departure from the Mark I. It's just it's a technical modification to expand compatibility. I can't. In fact, the only thing that I did is something that many people would describe as a technical regression, which is a move from USB-C connector to the mini connector. Controversial as that.
Well, so I did have someone reach out to me and go, "Can you ask him about why he likes mini versus Type C?" So
I wouldn't go so far.
I guess there's the question.
I necessarily strongly prefer it, and I probably will have a keyboard with USB-C at some point soon. But I don't. My objection is usually just like how fervently the preference is stated for USB-C, as if that is like necessarily obvious and required. And for a keyboard, that does not strike me as obvious. In most cases, you have USB-C on one end and Type A on the other anyway. So like even my computer was it's brand new, the motherboard, and it's quite advanced and expensive, has only one USB-C port on it. So in most cases, they're either plugging it into a hub or they just have a standard USB-C on one end, Type A on the other. So it doesn't strike me as particularly important what the other connector is on the other end anyway. And I actually like Mini because it's pretty robust. I hate Micro, but Mini is I don't know, it has a satisfying feel when you push it in. And at least at the time when I made that decision, it was hard to get for companies that make handmade nice custom cables. It was hard to get them in USB-C at the time. I think that's not true anymore. In fact, the majority are USB-C. But I know a lot of people who get my keyboard housings and do a build will oftentimes pair it with a nice cable. And so that was a consideration for me. And the problem with the first round of breakout boards was that if so I don't have extensive experience in electrical engineering, so I have to hire people to help me with that. And the way that the original breakout board on the Mark I was designed, it did have a USB-C connector, but it didn't necessarily conform to the full USB-C protocol. And those are two separate things. There's the form factor of the connector, and then there's the what goes over the wire and the configuration of cables on the wire. And those are two different specs. They conform to one, the connector, but it was designed for USB-C connector on one end and a Type A on the other, which, as I said, is very common. And so it wasn't until after I had shipped the group by that I discovered that if you actually plug a USB-C to USB-C cable, it didn't work. They just didn't support that and didn't think to support it. And so I realized that this would be confusing and contrary to expectations if somebody did think and want to plug a USB-C to USB-C cable into my keyboard. And so I got a quote for fully supporting the USB-C spec. And it was some extremely high amount because, again, electrical engineering is expensive and I know nothing about it. And so I said, you know what, let's just make it USB mini because the cables are more readily available. It's a little bit more robust of a connector anyway. And it's a keyboard. We're just sending characters of text. It doesn't matter over a cable that has a Type A on the other end anyway. Mm-hmm. So, I get the case for USB-C, but I don't see it as absolutely essential. And I think it's kind of funny when people put it in those terms. I just mentioned.
Because even when we built cables with John from Zap Cables, where he kind of took us through it, and the cables that he was using, I don't know if he's changed since we did the video last year, but the cable didn't support the full USB-C protocol. It was still just a USB-C or USB 2.0 cable. It just fit the connector.
Yeah, it gets exactly what it needs to get through. Quick shouts to Jack Static. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs. Huge shout out, Static. And then Top Clack, thank you for the 15 months. And Top Clack, I assume this is Quakeums saying, arguably one of the best guests you could ever possibly have. Hope you are well, Ryan.
Ryan, thank you.
So
I
it's
miss the Seattle meetups.
yeah, it is. I think it's just, to me, I assume the Type C is, well, I just want the one cable to do everything, right? But I want to meet the person that's like unplugging their keyboard to charge their phone. Like,
Yeah, just
you
let me know
typically
when
would have like a second cable for that instance. Like, who's like, oh man, I gotta unplug my keyboard to charge my phone. Like, typically the people will have that. So I mean, Gnarly Charlie for you says that's me. I guess no hate. I don't get it, but you do you, right?
I mean, I think it's fine. I would love to live in that entirely USB-C world. But first of all, we're a long way off from it. Show me a computer that doesn't support Type A. There probably are some laptops nowadays, anyway. But I just don't think there's necessarily a rush, and I wouldn't be surprised if by the time that world arrived, there wasn't a USB-D or something. Right? It's just like, it seems like premature optimization to me.
Mm-hmm.
People in chat are like, "Oh, Apple products, they do still support Type A. You just have to have the breakout. They only come with USB-C, but they still have, you're gonna need a dock of some sort if you have a MacBook, because you can't get by with just two USB-C ports, and one is the charger and then one cable. Yeah, come on.
You need at least two for a mouse and keyboard, right? Plus, with a keyboard, you get yourself. I'll plug Zap cables. Just get yourself, a keyboard that has both cables on the end, right? Then you don't have to, if like, oh, I want all my keyboards to have the same cable, or just get one of these bad boys. And
it's kind of a special case because it's all really designed to live within its own sort of platonic ecosystem, where you're like, connecting the Apple peripherals via Bluetooth or whatever, and it's they're known for their opinions, but they don't have USB-C on iPhones.
It's true.
I don't know. Someone did to say in chat, let's make a board with USB Type B. I think that'd be cool. I don't know logistically if that would even work. I'm sure someone could do it, but
I'm particularly fond of Limo to Type A. That's my new preferred connector, actually. Just to be weird and expensive, which is my special. Go ahead.
So your designs just seem flawless. Whenever Cyrus and I have had the pleasure of typing them in your words, I'm actually pretty anti Topra. I am not a fan of Topra at all, but just because you did not invent Topra, you just made Topra nice and heavy on the board whenever you pick it up from the desk. But your cases are flawless. They stick out like a sore thumb in the best kind of way. It's something that definitely catches your eye at a meetup. When you're approaching the design, how do you know when it's complete? How do you know when you look at it? And because you seem like someone who might have a hard time with going, okay, and now it's done. Because you strike me as someone who is very particular about how they want things to work and how it wants to look. So I'm curious to know when do you have that kind of moment where you're like, and that's it?
This is probably going to not add to my credibility as a sort of grandiose industrial designer, but I feel like the design part of it is like something that's done in 5 minutes, right? I know in my head what I want it to look like, and I'll take a pencil and I put it on a piece of paper and I'll be like, oh, this should be the profile of it, right? And then the sort of it's like a keyboard housing is a pretty limiting art form, let's say. There's only so many different things you can do with it in terms of the geometry before you start becoming something impractical that's not a keyboard anymore. You can only make it so big. You can only make the bezels so big. There are only so many shapes you can experiment with. And so, what people might think of conventionally as the core of the industrial design enterprise itself is actually pretty simple. I have a certain kind of, again, it's probably giving me too much credit to call it a design language, but there's a certain set of shapes that I like because they feel to me like retrofuturist designs. And I kind of like to incorporate that into my into my projects. And also, one other feature that I like about it is they're a little bit hard to machine, and so I find that interesting. Um, and the but that part of the project is actually a very, very small sliver of what's involved in making a group buy or a design available to other people, right? So a huge portion of it is the finishes, figuring out how to get finishes that look good and then can be delivered with consistent quality, and preferably in under 12 months. And that actually turns out to be extremely hard. Doing things like like taking pictures of it that are reasonably representative of what the object looks like. I don't, whenever possible, I don't use renders, and because I want to like actually prove to myself and other people that the thing that I'm saying I'm going to deliver them is something that I'm pretty confident I can deliver, and here's what it's going to look like. And so all of my product images, with very few exceptions, are actual photographs, but I kind of want them to look nice. So I spend a lot of time editing them, and there's some creative decisions that go into all of that process. And there's like most of the work around what I do is not that core process of like, oh, how are we gonna have this look cool, right? That's easy. It's everything else, right? And especially again, the fact that I'm working around these keyboards that are not designed to have aftermarket housings. So I have to figure out how to reverse engineer around somebody else's thing and see if there's some way to fit it into a housing that doesn't make compromises or sacrifices on the typing experience, but still actually like technically works out. And I think doing that kind of work is actually much harder and takes a lot longer. The R&D is way more expensive. You have to go through a lot more prototypes, because you don't, like, if you have CAD model of all of the components that you're working with, it's really easy to design a housing for it. But when you don't have a model for the thing and there's actually variation from one product to another, right? So like those tabs on the Realforce plates, they're not always in exactly the same position. So you have to have a few of them and have a sense of the variability and the positioning of those tabs to make something that's going to fit on everybody's keyboard. So it's like it's a much bigger, uh, the less glamorous parts of that work of the reverse engineering stuff that most people probably don't think about or ever really see is actually the bulk of the work, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, that's
I want to ask about the process of the heavy grail and that like that reverse engineering. And I know that took a lot of work, especially because of the way that it's built with the plate integrated into the housing as well, um, and going through the process of getting that molded and stuff. What was that like? And can you just, I guess, share a little bit of that process of the painstakingly going through all the steps of getting to the point where you had a final housing for it?
Sure. I mean, I think grueling is maybe one short description of the process. It's it was a process of many like increasing ambitions and disappointments through the process, and figuring out how, well, like at what point, maybe this is also to answer the question you asked before of like when is something done, right? And I've never had wrestled so much with that on a project before this one, because we should probably step back for people who are not necessarily familiar with the concept of this housing, and explain what the core technical challenge is. So the HHKB is a Toper keyboard, which, unlike all other Toper keyboards that I know of, uses a plastic plate that has the slider housings all as one piece, with the housing itself. So the core mechanism of a Toper switch is this thing called the slider housing, which is this sort of almost square but not exactly square uh, plastic shell that has a circular through hole in the center of it. And there's a slider, which is like a cylinder, essentially, that moves up and down inside of that. And these are two plastic pieces that essentially form like a linear bearing. And underneath the slider is this rubber dome and a capacitive coil under that. And the compression of the rubber dome under the slider and the coil underneath is what triggers the PCB to detect an actuation, right? And so the mechanism is quite different than a cherry switch, where you have literally two, electrical contacts coming into physical contact with each other and completing a circuit. Um, and so it's this weirdly mechanically complicated thing. I have no idea how on earth or why on earth anyone ever came up with it. But an interesting side effect of it is that, for some of us, subjectively, it has a really nice feel and sound. I realize, Chewy, you may not agree with that, but it's a thing. It's a subjective thing. And I don't know that they probably even set out to like create a certain feel or sound when they created this architecture. I think that, honestly, I don't even know what the goal was. But as a happy side effect, perhaps, I think it feels and sounds super nice. But it has this, as I say, it has this weird structure. And so in order to build out a keyboard using this mechanical assembly, you have to have an array of these slider housings in a plate over all of the actuation locations that are the switches. And so something like the Real Force uses these little snap-in plastic housings. They're little other than the stabilized keys, they're just like these little rectangular bits that pop into a metal plate. And then the slider goes into that and moves up and down, and that's it. And so there's a certain kind of rigidity that is imparted to the typing experience that makes a Real Force feel like a Real Force. The HHKB, by contrast, instead of using a single metal plate with holes in it that then these slider housings are popped into, it just has one big molded piece of plastic, and all of the housings are part of it. In fact, I could just show you a piece so you kind of have a better sense of what I'm talking about. So it's like that, right? And so these, see if I can coerce my camera into focusing. So these rectangular things are the slider housings I was telling you about, right? And you can see it's all one solid piece of injection molded plastic. And you can imagine the Real Force where these pieces are separate and they pop in. And here is an example. It's kind of hard to see since they're all black, but the sliders are these little cylinders that move up and down inside of it. So the challenge is, if you want to make an aftermarket housing for the HHKB, a choice to make. You can go the route of a metal plate and pop-in housings, and then which raises the question, where do you get that pop-in housings from? Because HHKB doesn't come with one. Or you just try to recreate that plate. I decided that, again, to reference what we talked about earlier, like what is in asking myself what the core premise of the HHKB is, what makes it special, why do people love it so much? I came to the conclusion in talking to a lot of people and just spending some time typing on the keyboard that a lot of it is actually to do with the fact it's not accidental, but it is probably because of that single molded plate. It creates a different sound and feel of typing on it. There is some inherent flex to the ABS plate that isn't present on a metal plate, and it really does change the typing experience in a significant way. So I thought, like, I knew, because again, if you look at the geometry of this plate, right, it has these tiny little details, many of which are repeated, but they have very precise positioning, and you definitely can't see in here, I think, but there are all these little intricate slider rails and everything. And it's I knew that so first of all, injection molding tooling is super expensive almost for anything. And I knew that something like this, that is so complicated to machine just the tooling for, would be unbelievably expensive. So I initially just ruled out the possibility of doing an injection molded plate. But I liked the challenge and the idea of, like, is there some way I could possibly solve this problem, right? Because ever since I've been doing keyboard stuff, especially Topper stuff, people always come up to me at meetups and stuff and be like, when are you going to make an HHKB plate? I've had this question thousands of times since I've started doing this. And of course, over time, it just kind of like eats at you, and you're like, well, maybe there is some way I could do that, after saying, no way, it'll never happen. So
a fun challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is a keyboard that I would not personally myself even use. So the whole appeal to me is A, making something that other people would be excited about. Based on all of these questions, I knew that that would be the case here. But B, also doing something that seems impossible when you set out on it. That's what I live for in life, is like doing stuff that my former self would have thought I'd never be able to do or, figure out. So I went down for a long time this avenue of exploration, which is urethane casting. So it's basically a way of doing short run production of parts that would otherwise be done in injection molding. And it's if you guys or people who are watching are familiar with the process of making artisan keycaps, it's the same concept, right? You have a two-part liquid polymer that you mix together. There's an exothermic reaction between those two parts, and it cures in a mold, right? And so you end up with something that has thermoplastic-like properties, but that you didn't actually have to make with injection molding. And the tooling is relatively inexpensive to make because you pour molds using silicone. The problem with it is that the tooling doesn't last very long, something between 10 and 50 pulls per mold. But I've always assumed that I was never going to make or be able to sell 10,000 HHKB aftermarket cases. So it seemed very well suited to my use case, right? Of maybe making 100 plates or something. And so what they do is essentially what this is. This started out as a 3D printed part. And there we go. So they 3D print a master, they put it in a silicone mold, and then they pour the resin in, and it comes out like this. And this part does actually meet all of my technical dimensional requirements. So we did some experimentation to scale the part up, the printed part up, so that when we account for the shrinkage rate of urethane polymers, that the end results are within tolerance. And so sliders do fit into this plate. They do move up and down. They do actuate the keys properly. It essentially is a solution to the problem. However, because it's a 3D printed part, there is a slight surface granularity, both from the 3D printing process and also the primer that they spray on it. And so that fact imparted this slight scratchiness to these urethane cast plates. I showed prototypes to a lot of people whose opinions I respect and who are HHKB users, and they said they actually quite liked the board. They liked the sound. It was definitely more clacky than an HHKB, but they also sort of recognized the point that I was making, that it felt a little bit not quite as smooth as it could be. But I think without exception, everybody who tried it said, this would be good enough to actually be a solution to the problem, and people would be interested in buying that. And so, having spent an enormous amount of money by this point developing the silicone molds, doing testing with the prototypes, doing the original 3D X-ray scanning to develop this CAD model, which I spent probably, I don't know how many hundreds of hours, but an enormous amount of time getting the CAD model right. After all of this, I just came to this inflection point of do I pull the trigger where it is now, and probably have an easy group buy that largely solves the problem and probably satisfies most people? Or do I make the plunge into perhaps the only way to really fully solve this problem, which is to get injection molding tooling made and to actually go the full length and make remake the plate in thermoplastic ABS in the same way that the original is made? I fretted and meditated about this for a long time, and decided that there was really not much point in doing it if I couldn't do it to a level that I was fully satisfied with. I was, it's in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a pound kind of situation, I suppose, in a sense, but also just being a sort of just being a dogged, I don't know, essentially defying the HHKB to like vanquish me. And because I just like, I think, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to be, I guess, proud of the result, as trite as that sounds. And so I decided, all right, fine. Let's figure out how, if I can find a injection molding tooling maker who I can get to understand how important that surface finish on that. So those sliders have a. There are a couple of places where they make physical contact with the slider housings. There's the outside of the cylinder that moves up and down inside of that hole. And then there are also these two legs on the slider that move up and down in these sort of like weirdly shaped slider rails. And that's the part that was imparting the slight scratchiness on the other on the urethane cast parts. And so I knew that it was very important that if I'm going to go the injection molding tooling route, that I'm able to convey to the person making the mold that you actually have to get in there and polish to a mirror finish those surfaces. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And the trouble is that those surfaces are extremely hard to access. To get, the tooling is made out of steel, and polishing it is like any form of mirror polishing on steel. You have to get tools in there that have an abrasive, like either a diamond abrasive slurry or like actual sandpaper on them that allow you to sand the surfaces up to a really shiny mirror finish. And that's fine if it's a big flat surface or something that's easily accessible. But this is like deeply recessed in the mold, and so in order to solve that problem, these parts that create the slider rails actually have to be machined separately, polished outside of the mold, and then pressed into the mold. But you have to have the tolerances extremely tight for those press fit inserts. Otherwise, you'll get the mold will fill into those gaps, right? So it has to be seamless after you've essentially tapped in the metal, but you have to make it separately just so you can get access to polish the tooling. So it took me a long time to actually even find an injection molding tooling maker here in the US that was even willing to do it. I talked to many of them and they were like, oh yeah, we can totally do it. And then I get like 3 months into the process with the quotes and we're like the day before my paying the deposit. It's literally happened twice. And they were like, oh, actually, we talked to our mold engineers and they're like, they're not sure they want to commit to this. And so I'm back at, square one again. Went through that process many times, but finally found a company that was willing and able to do it. And just a few weeks ago, they got me samples that I was happy with. So after COVID delays and engineering challenges and everything, it was a project that was supposed to take like 5 weeks to make the mold, and it took 8 months. That's how these things go.
Welcome to the keyboard world, right?
Right. So I mean, that's the core technical challenge of the Heavy Grail. Is how do you make that plate? How do you retain that sort of smooth, bouncy feeling that is characteristic of the HHKB? And also just like actually be able to physically manufacture the thing, right? Because I guess the thing that is implied, but that I never said, the reason why you can't use this is these are molded together. So the housing part just doesn't come apart. So unlike, all of my other housings, like the Real Force, you can just unscrew the flat plate and pop it into my housing, no problem, because the housing and plate are separate. So, I've had to design this entirely different plate that has a flange around it with screw holes that are just flat. So you can screw it in to a metal housing. And so that's like, that's basically the point of making a separate plate. Yeah. And then there are 2 versions of the HHKB, the Pro 2 and Pro 3. They're actually non-trivially different. The main PCB is the same, but the breakout boards are different. One uses, Mini, I think, and the other one uses C. The shapes of the breakout boards are different. A lot of little nuances. So I also had to figure out, so the Pro 2, super popular in the enthusiast community. If you go to meetups, you'll see them all over the place. But you can't buy them anymore from Fujitsu, really. You can only buy the Pro 3. So I again, I was just about ready to release my Pro 2 board. And I got, a ton of people saying, oh, but I can't get the Pro 2 anymore. I really want to buy your board. Can you figure out some way to support both? And so once again, it's like, do I release it? No. Okay, fine. Go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out how to make dual compatibility, um, and it's a never ending project that has recently sort of ended. That's basically the
Yeah,
Yeah.
it brings a lot of obviously technical difficulties, but one thing that I really appreciate, and I feel like a lot of boards kind of need this. Um, I mean, you've watched the community grow from a very very small number of people to hundreds of thousands now. One thing I do appreciate is you put like, hey, this is not just something you can throw together with minimal knowledge. Like if you've never built a keyboard before, maybe don't build this one as your
oh
first
yeah,
one.
for sure. This is an advanced build, I would say.
Yeah, and Cyrus and I have talked about because we'll, if we're doing like a tray mount board, it's like, okay, we've done this dozens and dozens of times, but we've had boards recently like the Kepler and the JL1 where it's kind of like, oh, gotta do some research on this, and I feel like for those selling those, it's like these are not boards that are made for people that are first timers, right? You should get your hands kind of messy with something else. You wouldn't learn how to solder on a key colt, right? You would you would want to hopefully learn on something else. So I really appreciate that. The web page for this. If you hit !heavy, this is. By the way, do you have one of these on hand?
No, actually, I've sent them all out to people who wanted to review them. I have one of those polished stainless steel ones, but it's actually down in my workshop, which is 2 floors below me, so I couldn't get it easily.
No worries.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that one because that. Well, I know Cyrus has a more detailed question about because you are a man of many textures.
Yeah, that was one thing that I've always, regardless of if you're a fan of Topra or not, the thing that is incredible about your boards, not only the design but the finishes. There's like a perfection to the Norbauer finishes that I feel like is kind of unmatched in keyboards. And I think we're only getting to points where maybe there are some other companies that are getting close, but like how do you go about picking the finishes that you do, and how do you get them to be as incredible as they are?
Well, the first one is easy, and the second one is really hard. So I pick finishes that I think look interesting and cool, and I with a strong preference towards things that are different than what is most people are doing in the keyboard world right now. This is just like my natural contrarian tendency on pretty much everything. It's like I just whatever anybody else is doing, I just want to do the other thing. Um, and so I think that's what really got me into textured finishes on keyboards in the first place. Partly, some of it was also just that it's when you get. I was originally doing a lot of anodizing just because that was the thing that everybody did, and I would get a lot of anodizing rejects, and you can't really reasonably re-anodize a part, definitely multiple times, and usually, if there is some let's say a decent number, a decent percentage of the time, if there is some cause for the anodizing to go wrong, that cause will not go away on re-anodizing. That is to say that the problem is oftentimes in the metal itself,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the anodizing process. Not always true, but often the case. So I became interested in powder coating very early on because it was a way of salvaging anodizing rejects without having to throw away this expensive part. And in the process of exploring that, I discovered that there's this rich array of incredibly interesting finishes that allow you to achieve solid colors, and interesting textures and things that just simply can't be done with anodizing. And since it was already had a different look that was very different from what other people were doing, and also kind of uh, allowed me to do colors that sort of suit my personal aesthetics better, which is I like solid colors. I'm particularly fond of light colors like whites and tans and things like that, because again they have this sort of like clean, futuristic, and or retro tech feel about them, and you can't achieve those with anodizing. So I was uh, once I was drawn to it initially for practical reasons, but then I realized that there were all these aesthetic possibilities when I started exploring sort of the more high end powder coat suppliers and the different types of creative finishes that they're able to mix. Um, and the feedback has been enormously positive about it. And so I just kind of ran with it for lots of reasons. It just sort of suited my design sensibilities. Um, The second part of that question, though, is the much more challenging one, which is how do you get consistent aesthetic cosmetic results? And this is hard for any process. Powder coat is not easier in terms of reject rate than anodizing. It's not. I think it's comparable to a Cerakote, but in any case, reject rates are often very high for these finishes, and to get it done really well is simply extremely expensive. You know, I've had a lot of trouble, even even sourcing in the United States and going all over the place trying to find vendors who do powder coating who are interested in making a product where cosmetics really matters. Because like anodizing, powder coating is traditionally an industrial coating. It's used to retard oxidation on steel parts and to give a slight cosmetic improvement, but it's usually for something like a filing cabinet or a large piece of furniture, machine parts, things where people are not going to be looking at it very close. And any slight cosmetic aberrations you just wouldn't care about or notice because it's on this huge thing that you're not getting up close and personal with anyway. Keyboard, especially a nice sort of CNC machined high-end keyboard, is a very different proposition, and you really do care if there's a little fleck of lint on the surface of it, right? And most powder coaters are just not accustomed to and not interested in working with a product that has to be that fussy, because they don't usually like filter the air inlets in the booths where they powder coat, and so surface particulates are a real issue, and especially like on solid glossy color finishes, something like that is going to be super visible. So I struggled for a long time getting people who could deliver really consistent results to me, and oftentimes, I if something is occasionally things will slip through my quality control, and I try really hard to fix those circumstances. But generally speaking, my policy is I don't ship something if I don't think it looks good or if it's not something that I would be proud of. And so, if I get a batch back that has a reject rate higher than my pre-orders, usually what I'll do is I'll tell people about it and I'll refund them rather than send them something that is, just like throw up my arms and say that it's not, or throw up my hands and say that, sorry, this is what I got back. Um, and so I have like a really vested personal interest in finding somebody who can make these finishes good because then I lose less money, which is great, preferable. And so it's been a multi-year quest, and I found a couple of vendors who I'm really happy with now and who get it, because they're accustomed to making consumer products, small electronics consumer products, and they do it here in the U.S. And that's just like there's so few companies left doing that kind of thing here, that it's been really hard to find them, and I have to pay them a huge amount of money to do it, and I'm very happy with that. I'm I'm very pleased to have the privilege to pay them a ton of money to actually do a good job. That's what I was looking for, and I couldn't find for a long time. But it's still not easy. We still get rejects back, and I have to try to have a pretty rigorous process of getting those parts looked over very closely, and like even the process of conveying to somebody who's inspecting the parts is hard, right? The In the past couple of years, we reached a point where I couldn't like really reasonably ship this stuff out of my living room anymore. So I found a company in the same town where I live that does like shipping of stuff, right? It's like a shipping warehouse, and they'll inspect parts for you. But I I had to convey to them like exactly how fussy they need to be about this, and they still miss stuff sometimes because they think, oh no, somebody couldn't possibly care about that little uh, tiny little speck on there. No, they care, right? And I think they have every right to care. Like I want to make stuff that like there's no point in doing it if it's not really cosmetically nice. It's like that's the reason I do this stuff. So I don't know. Sorry, the answer is that yeah, that's really hard. I agree.
Well, I still, one of the nicest boards I've ever seen, while it's Topro, so I didn't really type on it. But the retro refrigerator finish on the Norbaforce Mark II is probably
that-
one of the favorite finishes I've ever seen.
Thank you. Did you see the glossy or the matte version?
I saw the matte.
Okay.
I've seen
Yeah.
both, but the matte's
Okay.
the one that I'm talking, because there's something about a matte keyboard where it doesn't reflect too much light, and that's something that kind of happens with a lot of your finishes, where it's just it doesn't, if it's reflecting light. We've seen, obviously the Veracity steel is going to reflect quite a bit of light,
That's the idea.
but the matte, there's something about a matte finish keyboard where it's like it's like oof, like
I
it
completely
hits.
agree. I strongly lean towards matte finishes in almost anything. And the so it, as was implied by what my question earlier, there were two versions of that. There was the gloss and there was the matte version. And the gloss was a horrible nightmare. Always has that color always has been for me, because again, a solid color that's glossy is going to show any slight aberration in the finish. Something that's more matte or more textured is a little bit more forgiving, because while those slight non-uniformities may be there, you won't notice them, because the whole premise of a textured or matte finish is that it's created by surface non-uniformity at a microscopic level, right? But gloss, that is not the case. And there's something, it's not all gloss powder coats that are really hard. There's something specifically about the formulation of that particular powder from the company that makes it that is just like, it seems to always go wrong. And we're like literally 60% reject rates on that.
Jeez.
Which is why I eventually just gave up. And I said, I know that the matte version of this works much better. So I told people, I can't, it's just like, it gets so expensive when you're remaking something 3 times. Like, you have to pay to get it stripped and then refinished. And it's just like, you're way negative at that point. So I just, um, messaged people and I said, would you be willing to accept an alternate color or a matte version of this? And in most cases, people were okay with it. And actually turns out that some people quite prefer it, as do I. But it doesn't like, I kind of conceptually like the idea of glossy because of the concept of retro refrigerator, because you have these like old refrigerators from the 1960s that had it like pretty much exactly that color, and they were usually glossy finish. So I liked the idea of having it be glossy, but it was just the doing it to my standard of like quality control and having it be in that glossy finish. It just they were basically incompatible, and I had to give up at some point and switch to matte. So I'm afraid to say that color will probably not make a return unless I can find some other vendor who can make some custom formulation of it or something. There's just something wrong with the formula.
I just want like a chip, just a little piece of metal, just hang it right there.
That can be arranged. It's not a problem.
Watch it be. It was just that specific color too that struggled with that formula. There's like
It's
30
really weird.
other ones that are all fine. It's just that exact color.
Yeah, so I've done white from that same vendor, and it's touchy, and you have to really be careful about applying it. But it's nothing like the the uh, the retro refrigerator color. I don't know. There's something specifically about whatever chemical I guess they use to make that hue that must have some negative effect, because it's not just like little bits of lint on the surface, right? Which is the normal thing with powder coating that you have to watch out for. It's sometimes there would be these like really weird lines and patterns and dark spots and strange things that you don't see on other powders, or at least I've never seen on other powder finishes. So
Yeah,
it remains an unsolved mystery. One I would love to solve, because it's my most popular color, always has been.
So one thing that kind of going back to like 2018, whenever I started seeing a lot of these boards, you were one of the first people that I remember seeing. There were keyboard color options were gray, more gray, a different type of gray,
Right.
maybe a purple. Blue was really popular for a while, like royal blue. And then that kind of got replaced by purple, but not a lot of people were doing white keyboards. They couldn't figure it out. I know there was the Mao white, the Orange 75 that was in Mao white, but they hadn't really figured out how to do white quite yet. And the the Normforce was something, it just like it stuck out, right? Because it was like, this is the white keyboard. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, oh shit, how do I get my hands on one of those? And then I looked it up and I was like, that's too much work. When I'm first starting, I'm like, no, I have to buy a keyboard just to have another keyboard. Like, that didn't make sense to me. But now it's kind of like you're a trendsetter, right? Now it's, two of my keyboards are white um, from different types of finishes, uh, and what I like about what you've done with your grays even is you were like, cool, I see your gray keyboards, and I raise you multicolored gray keyboards because the VHS one, but in particular, my favorite's the Aperture. I think the Aperture looks great.
That's another very popular finish. That was partly inspired by a finish that you see a lot on kind of vintage camera equipment. And there's a particular like series of Leica cameras that are like some special limited edition where they put a finish like that on it. And I've always been sort of a photography nerd, and so the idea of putting that on a keyboard always appealed to me. And it started first as a bespoke finish that someone asked me if it would be possible to do, and so I spent a lot of time researching, just seeing if somebody made a powder like that. And when I found out that that it was available, and then did that one off for the client and saw what it looked like, I realized I probably should actually be offering this to a broader community of people, and it's proved extremely popular.
Nice.
It almost looks like a leather grain. I work for a company that we work in leather, and yeah, it almost looks like a leather grain. Even the VHS as well. That finish looks like something that you would see as a stamped grain into a leather.
Totally. Yeah, they come from a family of powder coat finishes known as veins. And I don't actually. It's interesting how they create it. It's something to do with so when it goes on the keyboard, it's just powder, undifferentiated powder. And so there's something in the chemicals that they add to the powder that causes it to like parts of the finish to flash off in like uneven ways, or maybe it's something to do with like the surface tension, or something about what happens when the powder goes from its powder state to its liquid state while it's baking, and then the solvents in it bake off. And something about the pattern of how that occurs forms that vein structure. I think that's really cool. Like I've no, how do people stumble into this, or figure that out? So I assume it must have been some kind of accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had to
But
have been.
it's really cool, and they have it controlled down to the level where they, the valleys are one color and the peaks are another color, right? So that's how the VHS finish is formed. The valleys are all white and the peaks are this light gray or sort of medium gray. And so the overall like gestalt of the keyboard when you step back is light gray, right? But it's a combination of, medium and gray and white, creating this overall impression. But if you look at it up close, it's actually different colored peaks and valleys. I have no idea how they make that happen.
No, it doesn't. Still, like Osiris said, they're some of the best finishes. But in talking about doing the powder coating, it's no secret you like producing everything here in America. So what led you to deciding to do everything here in the States?
So this was a long journey with multiple factors. I've talked about in the past in various interviews my struggles with quality control in overseas business relationships, and the uh, I just was never able to fully solve that problem of sourcing products abroad, not physically being there, and getting quality that was up to my expectations. And so I found that I was spending most of my time doing projects like the one that I described to you before that led me to powder coating, which is, ordering 100 keyboard housings, having to refund 50 of them because they weren't something that I was willing to ship because I wasn't proud of the cosmetic level of quality on it. And then how do I, rescue this financial disaster of having spent all this money on keyboards that I now can't use or sell to anybody? And the more keyboards I sold, the more I had time with these like secondary remanufacturing projects, right? I realized this was eating up a huge amount of my time that I could be spending on actually designing new products and projects. And so my original idea of sourcing products in the United States was to develop personal relationships with the people who are making these, right? Um, you know, I don't make super fancy, expensive, gratuitous keyboards because I'm trying to solve a problem of economic efficiency. These are totally sentimental, frivolous objects for me. Like I said, that they connect to something that I care about deeply from my childhood. Find them inherently physically satisfying, but it's pure whimsy, right? So the idea of like figuring out how to most efficiently or cost effectively or even profitably make one of these things just seems to me entirely beside the point. I'm just like, it's I would be a much smarter business person if that were the case, but it just doesn't inherently interest me at all, at least when it comes to keyboards. There's so many other realms of life that one could be involved in that would be way better for that. So ultimately, I just want to make stuff that I feel really good about, right? And that includes the origin of the thing itself, right? If it's fundamentally a sentimental object, then the story behind it and the people behind it and your relationships with the people behind it should matter a little bit, or at least they mattered to me. So I liked the idea of trying to actually physically go to the workshops, develop, cultivate actual like friendships and relationships with other people who are sufficiently quirky to be left in manufacturing in the United States, and because I often find that I share certain like predispositions with people like that. It's fun to kind of nerd out with people about machining and you know all of the equipment and infrastructure that goes into operating a factory in the United States. And so it's something there's the practical concern of just better direct involvement in quality control, but also just like feeling better about the process. And the problem with that is that there are so few people left doing this kind of stuff in the United States. And so it took me a really long time to figure out how to make that happen. And it's way, way more expensive. I still, I go through this a lot of the time with stuff that I get made. I'll get a quote from a US vendor and a vendor in China, because the people who help me do my shipping have like a special infrastructure in place to help people source stuff in China. So it's easy for me to get quotes, and sometimes I'll just do it kind of maybe just to make myself upset. I don't know, because I usually don't actually get it made in China. But like, so there are these. I'm making these little like product booklets that will ship with my stuff, starting with the heavy grail. If I can get my camera to focus on it, so it has like it's like a little passport, like an old style passport, and I'm like stamping the name of the product and a picture of it, and then there's like an individual serial number, and then I like sign it and everything. So these are just like little printed booklets, right? And you see, I don't know if you can see there, printed in the United States of America. So these booklets cost me about $8 a piece to get made in the United States. The quote from the Chinese vendor was about 25 cents a piece. You can see it says printed in the United States of America on the back of it, so you know the decision I made. But that's a hard decision to make sometimes. And the yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. But I don't always make the the most prudent business decision. But I really like working with those printing people. It's not that the problems don't happen, and it's not like quality control in the United States is always perfect. That's far from the case. And I think that every country has its own shortcomings of business culture. I find that in the United States, in particular, a lot of companies that are still left in manufacturing are just like, they're not very digitally savvy, which you would kind of expect. But it's really like, it's super hard to get quotes from factories. You try emailing to get quotes from almost anybody, even printers, especially like machine shops. They'll just never reply. You have to call them. Sometimes you just have to show up, right? And it's something that I've always struggled with, because I'm not. My natural introverted inclinations don't lean in that direction, right? I want to just be able to like send people the 3D CAD model and have them send me back a quote and have everything just be totally in this like, digital sphere. But it just, American manufacturing doesn't work that way. You kind of, you have to push a little bit, for better or worse. But when you do find somebody who really gets it, and then you can have an honest conversation with, and who understands the product, who understands your customer, who understands like that you're making a product that is essentially a luxury product, and therefore a certain like standard goes with that in terms of the cosmetic finish and what should and shouldn't be accepted in the inspection process. it's really nice when it works well.
Plus, relationships matter. Like that's a big piece, and especially right now, with as crazy as things have been this year, and as difficult as it's been for a lot of companies that are in manufacturing and stuff like that. Um, it's awesome to see that support for those people here in America, and it not just getting shipped over to China, where you could get it for a heck of a lot cheaper, but you can't go and you can't call up on the phone and say, "Hey, this one's messed up. Can I just swing by and drop it off?" You know?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely really like the machinist that I'm working with, the guy who is doing my powder coats. I mean, they've been so COVID has really hit them very hard. Uh, their workforce early on got hit hard, and a lot of people quit. And there's something about the I don't really understand. He sort of explained it to me a little bit that I think there's something about the like unemployment structures early on that led people like to actually make more money by not working somehow. I haven't actually checked whether that's true or not, but that was the claim. And so he his he's just had a really hard time staffing, and the people who do his powder coat have just like not shown up for the past many months, and he's had to like hire and train new people and everything. It's actually been really hard for me, and I've been super like there's still Norberforce Mark IIs that I haven't shipped yet, and I think that and I that's been like over a year or something, and the it's definitely hasn't been optimal, but he's always like he always calls me up, he explains what's going on, he's honest, and I believe like I don't think he's just lying to me, right? Like because I have enough of a personal relationship with him, and I also know that he's never actually even billed me yet for anything, right? It's because like he has this like sense of personal integrity. Well, I haven't like shipped the whole order yet, so I think he just doesn't feel right billing me for it, even though 90% has been delivered for months and months. Um, and I just really like the guy. He's super nerdy, like he's really into video games. His The business has a really interesting history. It's been involved in a lot of computing history, and they started out making servers back in the day. Just like a super cool guy. I really like him. And when things go wrong, and they always go wrong, it's much better to have somebody who you feel is going to be honest with you and not just like tell you what you want to hear. Um, and I don't know, it just makes the whole process much less stressful for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a lot about keyboards. You've also designed some pretty cool key sets. So I do want to talk about Galaxy Class, which is, I believe, one of the first sets you designed, as well as cool. Not cool. I keep wanting to say Cool Kids, but it's After School.
It's an equally good name for it, actually.
So,
Yeah.
but I guess with Galaxy Class, obviously, that's you're attempting to recreate something. Where After School is it After School 1992 or is it just After School?
The official name of the key set, I like verbose names for things, is After School 1992.
Okay, well, I will continue to
You can
call
call
it
it
that.
whatever you would like.
It's a good birth year.
Yeah,
As
for both of us.
Birth year.
in 1992. So hopefully that doesn't make you feel any and all
Well,
age. But
I chose it because it reminded me of being in elementary school. So it'll date me a bit, but that's all right. I mean, I think I think about this a lot. I talk about like really into the aesthetics of retro futurism and the like ideas that people had in the past and culture and visual aesthetics to convey the idea of like what the future was going to be like, right? And so I'm super enchanted with and obsessed with like the mid-century era, the 1950s and 60s. And I think you can be nostalgic for a period that you didn't even directly experience. Like I'm totally nostalgic for 1950s Tomorrowland at Disneyland or something, even though I never experienced it. Have no direct knowledge of that culture. But I think in some ways it's actually maybe even more potent. A lot of people who are really into After School in 1992, I've heard from them, were definitely way too young to have actually like lived through elementary school in the early 90s. But that's all of the aesthetics and all the art around it are meant to intentionally evoke all of that. Sorry,
Mhm.
digression, but I
Oh,
just
yeah. I mean, we're talking about it, right? So, well, let's just get into After School 1992 first. It's a fantastic set, by the way. Very colorful. You know, it's kind of funny because part of me, while there's kind of two parts to the irony of this, is After School is not a set where if someone showed this to me, I don't think I would go, that looks like something Ryan Norbauer created. So, you know, it's very. Not to say that the your personality is not very bright and colorful, but it's the boards that you make, other than the refrigerator. These key sets. It didn't strike me as something that I was like, oh, Ryan Norbauer made that. That's very, very cool. And then I look at the T-shirts that you always wear, and I'm like, okay, well, that makes a lot more sense. I mean, case in point, right now.
yeah, actually, it kind
So
of suits the thing very well, actually.
but and then of course, um, a lot of these boards have can a lot of these keycaps can have difficult times making it onto the boards that you actually create.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
So
that's an
I find
interesting
that's an
side question of
interesting.
like why on earth I am designing Cherry MX compatible keycap sets in the first place. And I think it's just it's the medium that's available to me. Um, and it's also, it's where I sort of come from historically in keyboard enthusiasm, at least in the keyboard community, is I was exclusively into Cherry MX keyboards for a really long time. Um, and specifically, keycap options that were available. I mean, I should have probably mentioned in my list of 4 favorite keycap sets ever. There were these keycaps that were came from someone on um, Geek Hack. I think his name was like Geek Feng, Feng, something like that. He was like a vendor in the very early days, and he sold these things that he called thick PBT keycaps, and they were just blanks. They came in gray and blue and black, I think, and they had this like really super thick wall, maybe like 1.8 millimeter, something like that, so even thicker than SA. And they created a very unique typing sound. And I always really loved those keycaps too. Sorry, that was another digression, but I just realized I had another answer to your question from like an hour ago. Um, but that's all by way of saying I'm not like without enthusiasm for Cherry MX keycaps, even though I don't use them on my daily driver keyboard. Um, and as a as an artistic medium, I think it's interesting to try to push what you can do within those limited guardrails, right? Especially like um, given my preference for American manufacturing and my personal like of the people at Signature Plastics, I'm always trying to find ways to work within what they have available, right? And DSS was an interesting profile because I'm not sure that anyone had ever actually done a community group buy with it before my set. Um, and also, I think all of the colors that I use in After School 1992 are stock colors from Signature Plastics. They're from their like house color rings.
Mhm.
So I found it challenging and or a fun challenge to see if there was some way to make this like aesthetically radically different than the standard keycap design within the limited set of options that Signature Plastics makes available. And uh, I guess as an aside, I've been sort of uh, I like this whole concept that has arisen lately of vaporwave aesthetics, which is just like this weird subset of like evoking 90s some subculture of things that were popular in the 90s. And I just love that there's like a word for that, and that you can, when you see it, you kind of know what it is. Um, and the pastel color palettes associated with it are very appealing to me. So I don't necessarily have to use it to type on every day to find it an interesting form of creative expression and design project. And as long as I know that there are people who will do that and who will be excited to have it, and I fortunately have heard from many of them, people are there are people who use it every day and are super into it, and that's all I need, right? um, and there's a kind of connection that comes from like creating something that other people see and that resonates with them, and that's often a sufficient reward for me if I'm not necessarily using.
I just love the full like product title on the website of After School 1992 keyboard action playset for adults.
Right. Yeah, that's just like all of the. When I was kind of thinking of this project and originally conceiving of it, I spent a lot of time watching old advertisements on YouTube for kids' toys, and trying to absorb like how that stuff was marketed and what the visuals of all that was. And everything was called, an action playset. So I wanted to find some spot for that. And I managed to include, in addition, it's probably not evident from any of the pictures on the website, but the keyboard ships in this gift box. Unlike a lot of signature plastic keycap sets, which just come in like plastic bags, mine come in a box where the individual keys are arrayed out. So when you open it, you actually see the set as if it were on a keyboard. But that gives me the opportunity to include other little things in it. And so I have all these like 90s kids things, like there's slap wrap bracelets with my logo on them. And then there's, I made little pogs. I don't know if you guys probably don't even know what pogs are if you're born in 1992, but I made pogs that there's like one for each of my keyboard designs. So there's like a Heavy Grail and a Norbauer or whatever. So you can play pogs with that, I guess. And
we both have older brothers, so it's
there you go. So
we got the bag of stuff that we're not playing with this anymore. It's like, all right, cool.
I included an iridescent sticker also, which was like you would see, stickers were very popular with kids in that era, especially like ones that were kind of a little trippy like that. So it's I don't know, that's why I do this stuff, is like coming up with weird fun side things. Keyboards are this as I say, keyboards are enormously satisfying and important to me, but it's a limited canvas, right? There's only so many things you can do with keycaps, colors, whatever, unless you're like developing a new profile, which I definitely would love to do at some point. Then there's only so much you can do. So you got to find some way to inject and infuse art into the project. That's what I find fun and engaging. And that project was great because I got to make a bunch of little toys.
Was the Pog that you did, was it just like the standard cardboard one, or did you do like the slammer?
No, actually, I just realized that as we were talking. I guess strictly speaking, you need a slammer too, and I wouldn't know how to get that made. Actually, there's like a guy who just like makes Pogs now. It's a thing apparently. It's I don't think he's on Etsy, but it's like somebody who would be on Etsy, and you can send him your files and he'll make Pogs. And the printing quality was actually really good. I think he's in Vegas. Of all the components of the product, that one came to me in like a week, and the keycaps took like 6 months to manufacture.
Yeah, it happens. It definitely happens. And yeah, I definitely remember getting like looking, you get like you insert the coin and use the old hand crank, and then you wouldn't know what sticker you're getting because it would give you like, there are like 8 on there, and you're just like, I need like 40 quarters to get the one that I want.
To be honest, I have no idea how Pogs even work. It was very popular when I was a kid, but it was like and I even collected some of them, but I had no idea how to play the game. It's I actually did that with a lot of stuff when I was a kid. Like I would collect comic books, but I wouldn't even read them. I was just like, oh, this is like it's a sought after comic book, and so it's fun to collect these things because I don't know. I think it's not uncommon for kids to do stuff like that, but I never actually played the game, so I'm totally not credible, and I'm evoking a 90s trope with offering Pogs.
We were in the age of late 90s, early 2000s of the Pokemon card trend, which is still going very strong.
Resurgence.
But, back then you just have them, and it's like, do you want to play them?
Mine sat in card sleeves and
exactly.
in a binder.
Mine were in a binder, and you just showed them off. Like, I didn't even learn to play until much, much later, but it was cool to have. I played the Game Boy game, so it was like, well, you got to have the Pokemon cards because, Nintendo knew exactly what they were doing when selling their products.
For sure. It's like in the early days of what now has become, the ways in which video games are so like hyper optimized to get people super dopamine addicted, right? And this like all these notions of like scarcity and social reward. Yeah, exactly. These are like the early pioneers of getting kids hooked on shit like that.
Yeah. Could you imagine, like, I think about this a lot. Could you imagine a video game company going, you have to buy 2 of essentially the same game But for the completionists out there, you have to have both copies. And you have to have them on 2 separate machines to be able to work, to be able to complete the whole game.
I'm sure there's some video game analog of that.
So, but like the idea that like Pokemon was so brilliant that they were like, let's release 2 different games, and
That are the
because
same.
now we have that literally the same, but because of a few different codes, there's 10 of these are unattainable, and 10 of these are unattainable. And yeah, it just, I'm like, whoever thought that up is living a very, very comfortable life right now.
It's okay. Now they
Can I
just
make a confession that's like it's probably not something that is the best thing for someone in the keyboard business to do? I don't play video games at all. I know nothing about video games. I've never played games of any kind. So it's to me just like a subject of morbid fascination, learning about other people's the amount of time other people spend playing video games and the ways in which they get engaged in it. And I mostly hear it by way of people when they hear that I don't play video games. They oftentimes take it as an opportunity to vent to me about the ways in which video games like ruin their lives. Like, they assume correctly that I'm a safe space for venting about that. And so like most of what I know about it, it comes in this like genre of people like, talking about video game grind and all of that sort of stuff. But I know absolutely nothing about it. So it's an anthropological phenomenon for me as much as anything
right
else.
now, I'm enjoying a game where I get to be a Viking. So like I get to look like I do, but in a video game, and way more fit in the video game. So it's escapism, right? It's just
Okay.
so.
I'm definitely on board with escapism. I just, I take it in the form of, film and fiction narratives rather than video games.
Absolutely. So I wrote this. Cyrus and I were writing out questions, and the last question that I typed on our in our conversation, I had to mark with a caret that said, "This is a completely legit question." I'm legitimately asking this question.
Okay.
Is DuckTales your favorite cartoon growing up? Because I've seen that shirt so often. So is that one of your favorite cartoons, if not your favorite cartoon? And what do you like about DuckTales?
That's funny. I'm actually not wearing a Scrooge McDuck t-shirt right now. I'm wearing a different Disney t-shirt, which, as you pointed out, could almost just be like a after school 1992 key set thing. It's this like super 90s Memphis aesthetic Mickey Mouse thing. So Scrooge McDuck is my spirit animal. And one might assume that means that I'm like a hardcore like libertarian capitalist or something, which is not exactly the case, although I'm moderately sympathetic to people who are of that view. But Scrooge is really like, if you watch, I mean, this is a ridiculous thing to say because it's like the most twee shallow show ever, but nevertheless, he's actually a really fascinating character. And there's to me, he's like a model of a form of capitalism that doesn't really exist necessarily, but is a healthy one to inculcate in children. And there's a certain kind of there's a certain narrative structure of some DuckTales episodes, which I find very cool. Which is there will be groups of people. Of the details are not important, but there will be different like factions or sets of characters in the episode they're disposed naturally to conflict or to have misaligned interests. And through the course of the episode, Scrooge will find a way to use those to bring their misaligned interests together around commerce and mutually beneficial trade. And so the natural tendency towards conflict, the inherent conflict between the characters or groups, is resolved by people finding some kind of happy modus vivendi between the different parties by coming together, not by like moral exhortation, but by this like low level base exchange, transactional exchange, right? And so the idea is like moving from the transactional towards the moral is something that can happen rather than the way that most people try to approach it, which is the other way down, which is you sort of like shame people into behaving well or tell them a nice story about it. And I think that's actually a very healthy model for children. um, and Scrooge is this, like, he has this thing that he says a lot, which is that, like, he became successful by being smarter than the smarties and tougher than the toughies, and most important of all, I made it square. And that's an important thing about him, is that, like, he's like, he embodies the idea of starting with absolutely nothing, and through diligent work and earnest entrepreneurship, he's able to, like, build an empire for himself without cheating anybody. And that's really important because there are all these other contrasting characters, like this other I'm actually forgetting his name now, but he's one of the villains of the show, who's another Scottish guy who's achieved his fortune through perfidy. And yeah, he's an interesting contrast against Scrooge, and a foe for him, because Scrooge actually holds to some, like, ethical standards. And I think particularly, well, I guess this is always true, so this is a platitude to say it, but I'll say it anyway. Particularly now, we could use models like that for, like, what the original values of American capitalism are supposed to be, rather than a lot of what it looks like nowadays, for whatever
This
reason.
this is
That was a
officially
very
the
serious answer
smartest.
to a DuckTales
I
question.
was about to say, this is officially the smartest conversation I've ever had about a children's cartoon from Disney.
I could go on and on. I actually adore children's cartoons. That's my form of escapism, actually. I
Flintheart
love
Glomgold, is that his
Flintheart
name?
Glomgold. There you
Okay,
go.
someone said
Absolutely.
it in chats. Thank you,
Yeah,
Holton.
thank you very much. I feel like I'm very ashamed as a DuckTales fan for not having been able to come up with that off the top of my head. But I was just watching the Charlie Brown Christmas Carol, which is a deeply or not Christmas Carol, but the Charlie Brown Christmas Special, which is a
Mhm.
deeply philosophical, like, very interesting, compelling story with beautiful artwork. And I feel the same way about the Halloween version. Like, I spend a huge portion of my time consuming the entertainment that I consume. The vast majority of it is, I think, children's cartoons, mostly from when I was a kid. But I even like a lot of contemporary stuff too. I find it deeply escapist, and the the artistic achievement of animation itself is just, like, unbelievably amazing. The work that artists do to transform still images into, like, living characters that you care about deeply, and, like, the background art is always, like, so beautiful. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Sleeping Beauty, but I think my
Yeah.
favorite artwork anywhere is Ivan Durrell's backgrounds, the gouache painted backgrounds for Sleeping Beauty. I just think that animation is this amazing, somewhat underappreciated repository
Well,
of American art, and
you know,
Japanese too.
last year we watched like we like to show our kids, like, during like snack time, we'll watch 15-minute like excerpts from movies, and we like to show them the original like Disney movies, right? Like the Snow Whites and the Cinderellas. Snow White was made in the 30s, and I remember watching that being like, this is a cartoon that was made in the 30s. Like
Yeah,
this
I mean,
movie
the
is almost
story behind the
100
making of
years
that is
old.
astonishing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
like,
mean, 100 years, that's actually interesting to think about, but that's almost true now, right? But also, everyone thought Walt Disney was completely insane when he made it, because there had only ever been these, like, 3-minute frivolous animated shorts, right? And he's investing this enormous amount of time and labor to create this incredibly painstaking thing that nobody ever thought would be anything anyone would pay to see,
and we're still talking about it.
and we're still talking about
It's still a mainstay. Um, but yeah, it is interesting you bring up the children's show, because some of our favorite shows are Avatar: The Last Airbender. The first run of that series is a fantastic show, made for children, appreciated by adults. We're both big fans of Adventure Time, another one where it shows a lot about it's like, when I watch that and I go, man, you know I hope the children are taking, they are to some extent, like, some of the messages in the show, which is just fantastic, and it's showing people now. It's each decade shows its what was important at the time, right? And a lot of these shows, it's kind of crazy how a lot of these children shows are able to do that and kind of slip it under the radar, and they know exactly what they're doing.
It's an art form that I really admire enormously. And um, again, it's like it's one of these genres. I think Walt Disney probably was an excellent example of this, of someone who figured out ways to make art possible by creating something that people were interested in supporting, right? And taking art out of the the abstract realm of fine art, right, for only for the smarties, and making something that is commercially viable that people actually wanted to engage with and support. That's like, Disney stuff is admittedly puerile and kind of cute. That's fine, but I really admire a company that's entirely built around that concept, right? Of like using art to emotionally connect with people in a way that is actually like commercially viable. And I would think that, in my in my own extremely like modest aspirations for what I'm doing, I would like to be able to do stuff like that, right? And it's why I find, the insertion of these little nostalgic toys in my key set to be in many ways the most rewarding aspect of what I'm doing. Is right. It's like adding, just infusing everyday, boring, mundane, transactional everyday life with a little bit of art. Is like, that's my greatest aspiration. It's a pretty modest one, but it's something that makes these projects way more fun for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, well, typically we end I'd love to sit here and talk to you for 6 hours, and I'm sure the next time there's a meetup, we'd start talking and then realize that the meetup's over and everyone's left. We're still sitting there chatting.
That's the
But
fun of a meetup.
yeah, exactly. But
Nothing wrong with
we do typically, we have our final two questions. So Cyrus will start with one, and I'll get with the other one. So Cyrus, take it away.
Yeah. So, what is your favorite and least favorite thing about the keyboard community right now?
That's a least favorite is an interesting question. Okay, no, I do have an answer for that, I guess, and it's relates to what I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm starting with your second question first. But the my least favorite thing is, let me figure out how to word this correctly. I think that a lot of people get motivated to do keyboard projects um, because they seek some kind of social recognition in the keyboard community. They want to like be, I don't know why, or I guess so. This is a totally separate conversation that we could talk about extensively at some other time. But I consider myself a stoic insofar as I have any like philosophical or religious beliefs or leaning. And the Stoics teach us, that investing your sense of self worth in other people's evaluations of you is a very perilous thing to do. It Because it places it entirely outside of your realm of control, and that is something that can be taken away arbitrarily and is quite fickle and not necessarily the best judge of merit. Um, and I feel like, I just literally hear this from people frequently that their motive, oftentimes in doing a project or running a group buy, is not necessarily like, here's this thing that I think is really great and I want to make it happen, but like, I want to make a name for myself in the keyboard community, whatever that means. And I think that's not a good reason to do something, and I don't think like um, you should seek that approval in that way, right? I uh, I think a far more rewarding way of engaging with people is it like, rather than at the level of like the abstraction of making a name within the community, is like making direct one-on-one connections with other people who share some obscure interest that you have. Somebody who wants to do that one, somebody else who, like, when I was first doing my Nova Touch project, the one other person who thought, oh my god, I have to have that too, right? And that person like bought my first prototype and we became friends and we talked a lot and he gave me really great feedback. And that I'll forever be grateful to that person, because it's um, he's what gave me the original reward of what I was doing and made me think, oh, this is something that could actually make people uh, do something that would make other people happy. Um, and so, by all means, I encourage people to do stuff, forge on their own, build their own stuff, do projects, run group buys, and all that stuff in the keyboard community. But uh, it's just a pattern I've noticed a lot of people like explicitly saying like, I want to do this project because I want to build a name for myself in the community. And that seems like, this is like purely Ryan as therapist advising against that. Like, don't necessarily have that as a motive, and it just seems like to be something that you see a lot, right? And increasingly, as there are like people who become popular as streamers and who like build companies or whatever thing, people see these models and they think, oh, this would be really great. I want to like have that for myself. I want some of that glory or whatever. And I think that oftentimes the people who are actually successful at doing these things don't usually get into it for those motives. They get into it because they want connection, they find the project interesting or whatever. Um, and anyway, that's my thought about that. My favorite thing about the keyboard community is that they're unbelievably amazing, unlike any other community I've ever participated in. They're like all of the people who certainly support my work are so incredibly kind and forgiving of delays, and um, I I'm deeply touched by the emails that I get from people who say that like stuff that I do really affects them at an emotional level in a way that I never thought would have been possible. And they don't have to like, there's no reason somebody should take a half an hour out of their day to write me this long email just to make me feel good. And I feel like in a lot of other domains, people wouldn't do that at all because there isn't this whole infrastructure and community around it. And whenever I ask this question, I always say my hypothesis about why keyboard people are so awesome is because we know that our hobby is completely ridiculous. And unlike other hobbies or domains where people share an interest that they take as being extremely serious and really important, it creates this like fodder for holy wars and debates and all sorts of conflict and stuff that just doesn't exist in the keyboard world. Because I think my pet theory is it's because we don't take this stuff overly seriously. You would think that a hobby that is based really primarily around buying expensive stuff and showing it off to your friends would just like attract a bunch of douches. But in reality, I think we're all a little bit embarrassed about getting as into something so seemingly trivial, and we sort of like we come together in our shared embarrassment and kind of like nervously giggle together at our meetups about how ridiculous the world would think that we are. And I think that actually is extremely healthy for a community to not take itself seriously, and I appreciate that enormously. And kind of actually dovetails with the other point I was making, which is like don't uh, believe me, clamoring to the top of the keyboard social hierarchy is not something to necessarily be proud of in the grand scheme of things. Just have a good time and connect with people at an individual level.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, and last but not least, if you are a fan of either, I'm completely unaware, but The Office or Parks and Rec?
I watched The British Office a really long time ago, and I have no idea what Parks and Rec is. I'm sorry to say.
Well, I'll take that as a half win for The Office.
There it is. I'll give it to you.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I quite liked the British version. I found it immensely, immensely depressing, but therefore high in real life accuracy.
Absolutely.
very nice. Well, Mr. Norbauer, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. I just want to give a quick little shout out again to the Heavy Grail. If you hit _heavy, the board is running through the 16th or up to the 16th?
Through the 16th. So a little qualification. My general strategy is like I'll say when I end a group buy, that's when you're guaranteed to get whatever you want. But I'll try to order some extras because people always, always, always find out about it on the 17th and say, "Can you please get me this thing?" So um, I'll just like randomly order a few colors, and they'll last a few weeks or longer past the group buy, and then they'll be gone. So don't like if you're short on cash or something, don't stress. You'll probably have the opportunity to get it after that. But if you have a specific color you want or a specific option, 16th is the deadline, I guess. So at the end of 16th on midnight is when I will remove the options that I'm not going to order extras of. And so like probably the Veracity Steel will be among those just because they're so expensive to produce. I can't afford to order a ton extra. And so, but anyway, that's a sort of answer.
Well,
hope that helps.
there it is. So, guys, if you're looking for the best option for Toper, right? The highest end option for Toper for sure. Definitely check out the Heavy Grail if you are into the HHKB boards. Also, so Dom, and thank you for the 200 bits, and Jay Chef, thank you for the 500 bits. Thank you for all the follows tonight. But yeah, quick shout out to our sponsor, switchmod.net/Mechs on Deck, Muted 2 running in January, mechsondeck.dixiemech.com, 8008 2 is running right now. Go pick up a set. Project Keyboards, you can go to mechsondeck.project.link. Keep an eye out for GMK Stealth, candykeys.com/Mechs on Deck for GMK Pink on Navy, as well as a lot of other cool auto items on that list, as well as our awesome sponsors, Smith Rune, which keep your ears to the ground for future runs of their awesome boards. Type Beast, type BEA.st for an amazing newsletter, and Zap Cables. They just released the Jungle Mat again, re-released the Jungle Mat, which is the Hawaiian, or not the Hawaiian one, the one that we both really like. So if you guys like those desk mats, I know Cyrus is big on the desk mats.
Absolutely. And again, Ryan, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for giving us some insight into the creation of the Heavy Grail and everything that you do with Norbauer and Co. Because it's kind of, I feel like it's a one-off still, even as other vendors have started to do more and more themselves. You're still kind of doing your own thing, your own way, and it's awesome.
I'm willfully ignorant of most of what happens in the keyboard community, for better or worse, and sometimes it leads me to crazy projects for sure. But thanks, guys, for coming up to hunt me down at the NorCal meetup and say hi. It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I had occasion to know you guys.
Absolutely. So, who do we want to throw it to tonight?
I think we go to Mr. Andy Wynn.
Andy Wynn. So Andy Wynn will be on with us next week on the 16th. So be sure to check that out. This Saturday, I will be building in Austin with T1s. So it should be a fun build. That's Saturday at 2 p.m. next week, Andy. It will be at the same time here, 8 p.m. Central. And once again, Norbauer, just it's always great just listening to what you have to say. I'm sure you've been told that at least once in your life.
You're very kind. I would find it extremely tiresome and very boring, but I appreciate your enormous forbearance and patience with my rambling, especially about the theory and philosophy behind DuckTales.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And as always, buy a Switch tester.